Once upon a time, in a lush green forest, a young and energetic hare named Henry lived happily. He was known for his incredible speed, and he never hesitated to boast about it. "No one in this forest can outrun me. I am the fastest of all," he would say, puffing out his chest. One day, as Henry bragged about his speed near the riverbank, an old and wise tortoise named Thomas listened quietly. He had heard Henry's claims many times before. Finally, Thomas spoke up. "Speed is good, Henry, but endurance and patience matter more." Henry laughed loudly. "Patience? Ha! I don't need patience when I can reach my goal in the blink of an eye." Thomas smiled. "Then let's race," he said. The entire forest gasped. A race between a hare and a tortoise? This was bound to be interesting. The animals gathered to witness what they thought would be a swift and easy victory for Henry. The wise owl, respected by all, agreed to be the judge. The next morning, at the break of dawn, the animals assembled at the starting line. The race path stretched through the dense forest, winding around hills, crossing a small stream, and ending at the giant oak tree. Henry smirked as he looked at Thomas, who seemed calm and unbothered. The owl raised his wing. "On your mark! Get set! Go!" Henry shot forward like a bolt of lightning, leaving Thomas far behind. The crowd cheered as the hare zoomed past trees and rocks. But Henry, being overconfident, decided to take a break. He looked back and saw Thomas moving slowly but steadily. "This is too easy," Henry chuckled. "I have plenty of time." He sat under a shady tree and soon dozed off. Meanwhile, Thomas continued his slow and steady pace. He didn't stop or look back. He kept his eyes on the path, determined to reach the finish line. His feet moved rhythmically, step by step, inch by inch. As time passed, Henry's nap stretched longer than he had planned. The cool breeze and rustling leaves made his sleep even more comfortable. Suddenly, he was awakened by loud cheers. He jumped up, rubbing his eyes. "What's happening?" Then he saw it. Thomas was just a few steps away from the finish line. Henry panicked. He leaped forward with all his might, sprinting as fast as he could. The crowd held their breath. But it was too late. Thomas crossed the finish line just as Henry reached out to pass him. The forest erupted in applause. The slow tortoise had won the race. Henry stood frozen in shock. How was this possible? He had been so fast. Thomas smiled at Henry and said, "Speed is important, my friend, but consistency and patience win the race." Henry sighed and nodded, finally understanding the lesson. "I underestimated you, Thomas. I thought speed was everything, but now I see that steady effort is what truly matters." From that day forward, Henry never underestimated slow and steady effort. He learned to respect patience and perseverance, and the forest animals never forgot the great race between the tortoise and the hare. The lesson deepens. Henry, though humbled, was still curious. He approached Thomas later that evening. "Tell me, Thomas, how did you manage to stay so focused, despite knowing I could have won easily?" Thomas chuckled. "It's simple, Henry. I focused on my journey, not yours. I didn't worry about how fast you were. I just kept moving at my own pace." Henry thought for a moment. "So, you weren't trying to beat me?" "No," Thomas said. "I was simply trying to finish what I started. The race wasn't about you. It was about my perseverance." Henry nodded, realizing that comparing himself to others had been his downfall. "I see now. I wasted time boasting and resting when I should have focused on my goal." Thomas smiled. "Exactly. Rushing without discipline leads to failure, but steady, determined effort brings success." Henry, determined to improve himself, began practicing patience and consistency. Instead of racing through everything, he took his time and focused on doing things properly. The forest animals noticed a change in him. He was no longer just the fastest, but also the most dedicated. One day, Henry challenged Thomas to another race, not to prove his speed, but to test his patience. This time, he ran steadily, pacing himself instead of rushing. The two reached the finish line together, both smiling, for they had both won in their own way. From then on, Henry and Thomas became great friends. Their race remained legendary, reminding all the forest creatures that perseverance, patience, and self-discipline lead to true success.